Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I want to welcome you to another training. We're going to get started in just a second. Just making sure I got my ducks in a row. I do. Let me turn this chat off. And we're good to go. We're ready to rock and roll. Hey, I wanted to share a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I really appreciate when you do. When you do show up early and on time, LinkedIn and YouTube, et cetera, pushes it out to other people and says, hey, they've gone live, come join the community. Because this is more than just me doing training. It's a chance for networking, especially if you're on LinkedIn. But I wanted to share this tip for success that I wrote down from yesterday. And I do this all the time, but just it came to my mind again yesterday on the training I did where I showed how to get a list of 300 people that are program office related people in a target federal agency. And in this particular case, it was the Veterans Affairs. But one of the things I wanted to remind you, and my tip for you is don't ever wonder if the people who are on your list are the right people to work with you. So if you're reaching out to the federal government and you've got a list of 200 people, 300 people, and you're going to reach out to them and talk, it doesn't matter whether they're the right people or not. Let them say no if they're not the right person. They don't want to talk to you. But sometimes they're not the right person, but they know the right person, right? They can give you some guidance. Sometimes they'll turn out to be friendly going, no, well, I'm not the right person, but I mean, I'm happy to do something. And I can go, well, do you know anybody in this office? Could you give me an email? And some people will literally look up a phone number and email for you. And so when you're doing cold outreach into an agency, in particular for the first time, or even any customer, right? But when you're doing this for the first time, anybody you talk to could be what I call a focused receptivity, meaning somebody who's just super nice. And so my tip for you for today, just a reminder and a thank you, is don't ever say no for the other person. Don't ever wonder before you reach out to them, oh, is this the right person? If you did your basic research and they fall into they might be the right person, that's more than enough. And then you're off to the races. All right, just quick little tip for success for those of you showing up on time and early. I appreciate it. I apologize. I'm still dealing with this silly cold that I got, but my mind is sharp. So we'll get into the training. We're going to be talking about how to choose your one target federal agency. And what I mean by this is I teach the 7-step process for federal revenue success that I created. And basically, I just created it on industry best practice, trying to make it as simple as possible for me, the people I train, and everybody who watches my training to be able to follow this process. For example, how do I get into a new agency? How do I start making revenue in a new particular area? I lay out a 7-step process. And the first step is research, and then it leads into targeting, which I was just talking about, and outreach and relationship building. All of that, though, is anchored on you choosing one federal agency to pursue. And so what I said when I put out this invite for the training is that if your sales are lagging, if you're not hitting the revenue goals that you want to be hitting, then there's a really good chance that it's not your product or your service. You probably offer really good services and products. You probably are very good at it, a subject matter expert. I submit it's your focus, right? And it could be the focus is part of the process. So wherever that focus is, it could be the focus on the opportunities you're going after, on what you sell, what you say you sell, et cetera. Today's focus that I want to talk about, though, is your focus on one singular agency, one target agency is what I call it, that you sit there and say, that's where I'm going to get my next $1 million or something. And I'm going to do everything I can to develop that one agency, that one customer into $1 million in revenue. And we'll talk about the how in a minute. Way back when we used to hunt for our food, right? There was this line that said, if you chase 2 rabbits, you're not going to eat dinner tonight. And what that really meant was, like, if you're chasing this rabbit and you got a couple and you're moving out there and you're moving after this one, and then this one comes a little closer, you're like, oh, I'm going to go grab that one, and then the other one kind of passes by and you're trying to grab that one. If you chase 2 rabbits, you're not going to be able to focus, because every time you think you're committed, the other one will distract you. And agencies are like that. Every time you think you're going after the Army, but TSA comes along, it distracts you, and then it distracts you. Well, every distraction is a restart. When we think about ourselves professionals just sitting in front of a computer, especially back in the days when all of us were in the office, there was solid science behind this idea that you did not want to let yourself be interrupted during the day when you were working on a particular project. Let's say you were writing, a document, a white paper, a proposal, whatever it is. But when you're in the mix of it, if somebody interrupts you to do something else, it takes you a long time to come back to where you were at. You have to get back into the zone on it. You have to remember where you're at. You might have been on a roll and now you're off the roll because your boss interrupted you or something. I used to sometimes when I was in a cubicle or an office, I'd put a tape across my door saying unavailable until 1 p.m. or something so I could focus. Well, here it's the same thing. We need to be able to focus because every time we look at a different agency instead of one target agency, we're restarting. But when we focus on a particular agency and we say, I'm just going to stay focused on these guys until I get $1 million out of them or whatever your goal is, then you don't ever have to restart. And you're building on that momentum, that compound effect of everything building on itself. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Put focus rocks in the chat. Let people know who aren't here that we're talking about focus and that you understand that that's what I'm going to be really driving down on today. I'm going to break up the topic of the one federal agency that you can choose that's going to help your business have the success you want and how to choose that. I'm going to break it up into 3 sections today. First, I just want to talk about what do I mean when I say one agency, right? What does that actually mean? Because the federal government is so big and we hear all these different names. I'm going to clarify that. Second thing I want to talk about is why, double downing on this, right? Why chasing multiple agencies, multiple rabbits means you're not eating tonight. Chasing multiple agencies means you're preventing your own success. I'm going to talk about how that aligns, and hopefully I'll be able to convince you that you really do need to pick one agency and commit. And then the last thing I want to wrap up with is give you some actual guidance on how to pick the one agency that fits your company. There's some ways you can look at this that enable you to go, you know what, this agency is the best one to help my company hit the goals that I'm trying to hit. All right, that's what we're going to be talking about. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonough. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I am founder of callplan.ai, my new company. And I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. After I got out of the Army, I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner myself. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. This is what I want for you. This is why I come back over and over again to do this training. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, please subscribe to Government Contracting Success. And if you're not following me already on LinkedIn, make sure you're following me. If you're over on YouTube, I see several people over on YouTube. Come on over here on LinkedIn. Not just following me, but look at all the people who are in right now, right? You've got people who are in the training. You can engage with them, and now you're building your network while you're learning from me. The last thing I wanted to mention is tomorrow's training is on FPDS, on part 3 on FPDS. I love FPDS because it's where most of the contracts the government has ever awarded out there. That's where we can all find them. But I love it because it is just pure raw data. It's the closest thing I can get to a big, massive spreadsheet. And I don't have to overly think about using the tool. It's pretty intuitive once you learn a few tips. So tomorrow I'm going to be driving into what are some of the top 10 tips or tactics that I think all of us should know. Make sure you join on that. Oh, by the way, speaking of networking, December 17th. Okay, maybe my mind's not totally as sharp as I think. Today is the 11th. Next week on the 17th, on Wednesday, I'm doing a virtual networking holiday party. Come on in, join. I think we have well over 300 people now. So I'd love to have you in there. And if you're already coming, please repost it out there. Let people know that we've got these networking events that you and they can network at. Okay, I got 22 minutes, and let's start with what does one agency actually mean when we say that? The term agency, I want you to think of that loosely. Don't put any, it has to mean this, because that's just worthless in what we're about to talk. An agency could mean a department, an agency could mean an agency could mean a subordinate agency, an agency could mean something below that. Don't worry about it. When we say agency, let's really say one customer, right? And that customer might have a designation, but frankly, in some large organizations within the federal government, they call it an agency. And other times it's the exact same thing, but they call it a component or an administration. That doesn't really matter. What I'm really talking about is one key customer within the federal market. You need to pick one key customer. And what that means is it needs to be small enough that you're able to drive in, but big enough that they got the revenue the spending that will enable you and all your competitors to be able to make a good amount of money. So let's talk about just what's the federal government have in there? What is an agency? What's not an agency? The first thing I'm starting with are departments, because these are not agencies, but these are classic places where we small businesses, and I was guilty of this myself as well, we get distracted. We're like, what's your target agency? Department of Defense. It's like, oh, really? It's like, that's a pretty darn big thing. Department of Defense is more than half of the federal spending, right? It's too big. Or maybe you're saying it's HHS, the Health and Human Services, right? That's too convoluted. HHS is made up of all sorts of unrelated agencies that are within it. And so it's really, really big. And they operate separately. I have DHS in here at the department level. This is Department of Homeland Security. In there, you've got the Secret Service and you got the Coast Guard, for example. Those two have nothing to do with each other. U.S. Coast Guard is more like the military, and Secret Service is more like Department of Justice type thing. There's nothing alike. And so if you say I'm going after DHS and you try to go after both of these people, they're unrelated. It's not going to really work together. So I want you to keep coming down and think about, well, how can I keep coming down? The next level below this, and you definitely want to come below the department level. The next level is, ironically, more departments. So the Department of Defense has Department of Army, Department of Navy, Department of Air Force. And just so you understand that, even they go down further, where the Department of Air Force has Air Force and Space Force. Department of Navy has Navy and Marine Corps, right? And the Department of Army has, Army. But you get it, right? It's coming down. Space Force and Air Force, they're not the same. They've got different, whole different missions, whole different things they really buy, like their priorities. And so these are important things to understand. The Marines, and hopefully none of the Marines get mad at me for saying this, the Marines are more like the Army, where the Navy is just, and I say this softly, right? The Army and the Marines are on the ground, basically. The Navy's in the water and the Air Force is in the air. I'm simplifying it, right? And Space Force is in the space. And so the idea is all of those have massively different agencies or missions. When you're trying to align them and go, oh, I'm going to go after Space Force and Navy or something, it's like totally unrelated. And that's why we're saying you got to come down for multiple reasons, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But you want to begin looking at these major departments and say, how are they split? And am I coming down low enough? An example is the Department of Veterans Affairs. If I stick with the second bullet, agency and component level, in the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that was my biggest customer at my last company. We just did so well, and we were everywhere. We were in the White House, we were in every DOD, but I did a ton in the VA because I doubled down on the whole idea of hospitals. But in the VA, you have Veterans Affairs, and under Veterans Affairs, you have these three major agencies, or they call them administrations, right? The Veterans Health Administration, the Veterans Benefit Administration, and the National Cemetery Administration. And so these three all have completely different type of missions and the things that happen. For me, I settled in on VHA. So Department of Veterans Affairs, I went down to Veterans Health Administration, and then I actually went down even further, which I'll talk about in the next bullet. But this idea of keep looking at it and going, where can I be split across? Same thing with DHS, right? DHS, I think, has 7 or 17 components. HHS has that many subordinate agencies like, NIH, CDC, CMS for HHS. DHS, you see it's got FEMA, ICE, TSA, and Customs and Border Protection. So you start seeing a lot of these. Well, when I'm saying you need to pick an agency, I mean you have to be down at least at this level, picking Customs and Border Protection or ICE and say I'm going all in on, ICE. Or Coast Guard is also a DHS. Coast Guard got a huge budget push. If you're in Coast Guard, you're in one agency within the Department of Homeland Security, but that's focused now. Now you really double down on the Coast Guard. And then you can keep coming down. Right below that, you have buying commands or lower components, lower agencies, whatever the term is that any of these groups are using. But as you understand the organization of a department and you pick a department, and then you try to pick an agency and you come down lower and you go, hey, I want to pick the third level down. That's where I'm suggesting you should be, as long as they're spending enough for you to make $1 to $5 million in revenue from them, right? And not take all of the spending that's on what you sell. Hopefully that makes sense. So now you're able to look at these buying commands. The Navy calls them buying commands. Air Force used to call them major commands. They're something else. Can't remember what they are now. But the Navy has these 10 buying commands, I think. 2 of them are Marine Corps, and 8 of them are the actual U.S. Navy. So like NAVWAR, that is Naval Information Warfare Systems Command. NAVSEA, that's on the water. Naval Surface or Naval Sea Systems Command, on the water and in the water. NAVAIR are the airplanes that they deal with. There's NAVBAC for facilities, managing the installations. NAVSUP, dealing with the supplies. Naval Supply Systems Command. So these are coming down. So if I went from just coming down, right? Department of Defense, Department of Navy, U.S. Navy, NAVFAC for naval facilities, because I'm going to go in there and do installation stuff or something. That's pretty big. And then the VA, my example there was I came down, Veterans Health Administration, I came down into the hospital levels. So these VISNs, these networks of hospitals, and the VA has 150 or so hospitals, big campuses. And so I said, that's where I'm focusing. That's the level of focus I want to encourage you when I say pick one agency. And then you can come down even lower, program office. Yesterday, I did training where I showed how I took a subscriber in Call Plan AI. She was trying to get in the VA and go, how can I find a bunch of people? I said, let me just do training on it. And I went and found 300 people inside of 2 hours, names, numbers, and emails of contracting officers, program office people. But the program office people were the best because I found these people who were like environmental health safety leads or something title like that, job title, and 150 or 200 of them with name, numbers, and emails. And I came down and I said, hey, that's where my focus is going to be. And for her, that's where her focus would be. That's okay as well. Like coming down and saying, I'm going to focus on, the cybersecurity information or cyber information security officer or something, right? CISO inside of the IT shop. I might say, I'm going to go after that and across the board. The goal here, when I say one agency, is you've got to pick one customer, one rabbit, and say, I'm chasing that rabbit until I get it so I can eat, right? And the hardest thing to do is to pick that and put blinders on and not look at the other agencies. I guarantee you, if you pick an agency and it is big enough to accommodate you, right? It doesn't have to be overly big for a company that's 5 million and below to be able to make money. If you pick that one agency, you will be able to develop business in there, subcontracting, prime contracting, et cetera. All right, so that's the idea of what we mean by one agency. What does one agency mean? So let's talk about why chasing multiple agencies are preventing your success, right? You can reverse this to the positive. But the idea is that if you're trying to sell to multiple agencies, it's definitely going to kill your chances of hitting your revenue goals, right? And having success in federal sales. I put a couple examples here, right? Too many buyers, you can't research them all. If you have folks that are in multiple agencies, buyers in different agencies, you can't begin to understand them. Step 1 of my 7-step process is about researching an agency and understanding it better than it understands itself. Well, if you try to do that in the Navy and the Air Force or TSA or something, and you're doing multiple, you can never really accomplish that. But if you sit there and say, I'm going to go to TSA, and that's my target agency, now you're able to focus on that one buyer, and you're able to really research into depth on them. I already talked about the second one, too many missions, where if you've got different missions with the Coast Guard, Department of Education, or the Air Force or something, and you're trying to go after multiple agencies like this, your offering and your message to the buyer is going to be too generic, because you have to be generic if you're going to be going after multiple people. But if you're going after the Navy, pretty soon you start aligning all of your marketing material, all of your message and meeting terminology and words you're using around how the Navy speaks about what you sell. You're talking in a way that aligns to their mission, right? How the Army and the Navy speak about something, which they're more warfare units, that's far different than how maybe the Department of Energy speaks, or Department of Education, for example. Totally different missions. And so too many missions doesn't allow you to really have a hyper-focused message to that customer. A big one for me is about relationships. I like to say is relationships are all connected. This is our networking, right? I'm looking in here right now, just at the people on the chat, and I'm looking at Melvin, who comes to this training all the time, Jerry, who comes to this training all the time, Cecilia, and others. These people come in all the time. They are creating a network around our community. When you sell into a single agency, you can build that same network where you're the nucleus of that network. You're starting to get to know contracting officers, program office people, et cetera, and you're able to build these related relationships where Jane knows John and John knows Paul or something, right? And you're able to build these relationships and bounce things you learn from each one of them off each other into the next. And you're doing that for your benefit and to the benefit of the government buyer, that you're able to take things you're learning. But it's because you're focused that you're able to keep all those relationships tightly related to, let's say, TSA, focused in there. The repetition one is huge. If you try to sell into many different agencies, one of my favorite ways to get into an agency or to get visibility within an agency is responding to sources sought and RFIs. If you respond to RFIs and sources sought that are about what you sell, your core competency, then that's a good thing. And you should be doing that all the time. But you should be doing it in one agency, your one target agency. If you do it in multiple agencies all around, well, no one really gets to know you. But if you're doing it all within TSA or Centers for Medicaid Services or CMS at HHS, right? If you're doing it in one place, that repetition of responding or meetings, et cetera, that enables buyers to begin to know who you are. When somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a company that kind of does this, you know what? Let me flip through. I've got this person who pings me once a month, once a quarter. I begin to know them. So you're able to have repetition in the way you reach out. This is why I talk about process leads to repeatable results. And this is kind of the process in visibility. And then the last one I had, there was no focus, right? Your pipeline is everywhere. Not only if you're not focusing on the one target agency, but your one core competency, then pretty soon you have a pipeline that does not look like it's for one company. When you looked at my pipeline for my last company, everything in there said SharePoint. Sometimes I won contracts that were not SharePoint, but they never even hit my pipeline. The government just gave us the contracts. It like somehow got us engaged and said, write something. But our pipeline, what we're pursuing over the next 1 to 3 years, that pipeline all said SharePoint. Everything in our pipeline was SharePoint. That's how focused yours needs to be. And it needs to be focused on that one agency. So you're digging deeper and deeper in there saying, I know there's $1 million for me in this agency. I'm going to do the work that gets me in there, gets me in front of the people that have the opportunities so I can learn about and respond to those opportunities. I put in here, and you probably have seen this already as I'm writing it, that small businesses under 5 million, even 10 million, you just can't sell to many agencies, multiple agencies. You know, anything beyond 2 agencies is crazy. And that's only if you've got 2 people, right? I encourage you to really never let a single business developer, salesperson, whatever in your company, you never target more than one agency. You have got to convince yourself or your bosses that we need to pick one agency. If you need to go a little bigger, for example, if I'm in DHS and I'm looking at TSA, I might also look at, FEMA or something. Maybe they're related in some way, or a related agency within the same department. You could do a little expansion there, sure. But don't be going to the Army and over to the Air Force. They're completely unrelated. Certainly don't go to DHS and the Army. They're like, it's convoluted out there. Winners get known inside that agency, and you build your traction. I call it the wheel of success. When you're able to land a contract, start building the past performance relationships, et cetera. But it starts with you going in there and getting that $50,000, that $100,000, that $500,000 contract that enables you to keep going further. I have a really good friend over in CMS, in HHS. They're only in one agency, and they built up $100 million company just in that agency. $100 million company within one department. You can do this if you just got to make sure that agency you choose is spending enough around what you sell. We'll talk about that in 1 second. The last line I put here, a line I wanted to make sure you're thinking about is that if buyers in one agency don't really know you, then how on earth can buyers in 5 agencies know you? They just definitely won't. Right? And you can see this, right? Think about it. How many buyers know you? How many are picking up the phone and going, oh, I'm going to call Neil really quick, right? And you need to focus down so the buyers, the program office people, small business professionals within an agency know that you love their agency and you want to support their agency and grow as a partner with their agency. That comes from choosing that one target agency. Okay, hey, speaking of one great agency and partner, I did want to thank Voltron for being the sponsors of our live trainings. Voltron helps you write better proposals out there in minutes instead of weeks. The whole time I was running my companies, it would take us weeks to get proposals out there when any of my team was writing them. And now with tools like Voltron, you're able to accelerate that so much faster. The reason I like Voltron is because they specialize in the federal market. They are very focused on being the best at delivering proposals in the federal market. And I would ask you to thank them for sponsoring us and bringing this training to you, helping us all network with each other. If you are writing 4 proposals a month or more, make sure you reach out, get a demo. Okay, so let's, this last slide, I just want to talk about how to pick that one agency. And let me put myself in a corner to make it a little bigger here. How to pick the one agency that fits your company. I wanted to give you some guidance out there because it shouldn't be that hard. It might take a little time, right? But it shouldn't be that hard to pick a one agency. So the first thing is, it starts with understanding you and what your company does, not the agency. You don't randomly look at an agency. First, look at yourself, right? You have a niche or a core offer, what I like to call a clear, focused offer, right? So you need to know what that offer is. In the federal space, on our capability statements, we call it a core competency, and that needs to align directly to what your target agency's mission is. Unless you have clarity, on that core offer, you're not going to be able to figure out whether it aligns with the agency's mission or needs. The second thing is, look at where you've been paid, your past performances on commercial, state and local, nonprofit, doesn't matter, federal. Look at where you've been paid because that signals where you fit. When I look at some of like yesterday, I was talking with, I was doing a training yesterday, and it was around Annette, who's got a company that does UV disinfection. And where she's been paid is in hospitals, in medical type environments. Well, that naturally leads her to the Department of Veterans Affairs or the Department of Defense's Military Health Services or HHS inside of NIH. I think they have 17 medical centers, right? It naturally leads her to those and maybe not Department of Homeland Security, maybe not Department of Energy, right? So that idea. And the third thing is who buys what you sell in the federal market. So you look where you've been paid, and then where is the government buying any of this stuff? Which program office? Align this to yesterday's training because it was such a good training where I showed how do you go down to the program office and you just find the right office. If you understand the agency, you'll be able to figure that out. And then you want to validate the choices that you're making, right? You're picking the agency you're looking at. You need to validate that against who's awarding contracts for the products and services that you're selling. I show how to go into FPDS. I'm going to show it again tomorrow in tomorrow's training. But you want to find buyers and search in there. I went in and looked for mold remediation, which is what Annette's company, that UV disinfection, they attack mold, right? They keep it so mold never comes around. Well, so who's doing mold remediation, getting rid of mold? That's an ideal buyer to go have conversations with. Which vendors are doing something that is similar to that? So she has a product that fits inside of an HVAC. Well, maybe she can team up with HVAC sales companies that are selling HVAC units and go in. Well, you research that, you figure that out. I use FPDS. It's my favorite place to kind of do that. Same thing, I just said that on opportunities. You can look at SAM and see what's out there. You can look at FPDS, but figure out what opportunities are out there. The last thing I want you to pay attention here is that you need to pick the agency that has that you got the highest credibility and lowest friction to go deep. And what I meant by this is, for me, I'm an Army guy, so maybe going to the Army or to VA, that makes sense. The Coast Guard likes to work with coasties, maybe going in there. State Department likes people who have some of that background, right? So picking that, it lowers the friction because I'm already speaking the language. You're already speaking their language. And then the idea is you go deep. So when I went into the VA, I just went into hospitals and then kept going deeper into the VA. And you can do that as well when you pick that one agency. But it begins with knowing, first off, what you sell. So this is what I want you to do and remember from today's training. Write down the one thing you actually sell. right? Make sure you really, really know what it is and niche it down. You have to narrow that down. Don't sell everything because that doesn't work for companies under 5 or 10 million. It really doesn't work for companies under 50 million. The second thing is build a short list of 3 possible agencies, not departments. Come down a level and NAVC or NAVWAR, for example, ICE or CBP. Pick 2 or 3 possible agencies that work, and then go look at FPDS. Do your data research to confirm whether they're a good fit for you. Are they spending enough on what you sell that they can accommodate you as a vendor in there because they buy it and they're spending? So do those 3 things and you'll be rocking and rolling. If you found value in today's training, do me a favor, repost this on LinkedIn, let other people know about it. And as you move through your day, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.